I told you this was private property." Her voice cracked across the water like a whip. Margaret Pierce, president of the Lake Hill Estates HOA, stood on the bank of my lake, pointing at me like I was some kind of armed fugitive. I was just floating. Middle of a still Arizona morning. My brother's old fishing boat rocked gently beneath me, the sun just starting to bake the lake surface in gold. A cold can of root beer in one hand, my fishing rod in the other. Tex, my blue heeler, curled at my feet. Peace. That's all I wanted. Then came the sirenless cruiser. A dusty plume followed it up the gravel road as it parked just beyond the willow trees. Tex sat up. The officer stepped out slow, one hand already resting on his belt. He squinted at me like I'd just robbed a bank instead of casting a line on my own lake. "Sir, we received a call from the Lake Hill Estates HOA. They say you're trespassing on their lake." I blinked. "Twice. My house is right up there." I pointed up toward the red-roofed ranch house, perched on the ridgeline. "This lake came with the land. I've got the deed in my truck." He sighed, like I was the one bothering him. "Well, you'll have to come ashore and show me." As I reeled in my line, calm, respectful, Margaret shouted again from the bank. "We warned you, Rick. You can't just use our lake like you're special." Her voice had that HOA tone, nasal, certain, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. She had no idea. 8 minutes later, after showing the officer my paperwork and watching him drive off with an apologetic shrug, I made a quiet phone call. Not to a lawyer, not to the police. To Greg, my real estate guy. "Who owns the Marina at Lake Hill?" I asked. "By sundown." I did. The Marina. Their precious floating docks. Their event space. Their summer concert grounds. All of it. Mine now. But before I could even finish smiling, Margaret stormed off the bank, toward my boathouse, crowbar in hand. She didn't knock. She didn't shout. She broke in. And what she did next nearly burned everything down. "Hi everyone. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had an HOA nightmare like this? Drop your city or story in the comments. I want to hear it. Let me tell you how this war really began. Not with shouting, not with lawyers, not even with cops. It started with kindness and cookies. My name's Rick Dawson, 52 years old, retired oil engineer, widower, dog dad. I came to Winslow Bend, Arizona 2 years ago with a simple goal: peace. After decades of managing rigs and contracts across dusty fields and scorching platforms in West Texas, I'd had enough. Lost my brother to cancer in 2018, lost my marriage not long after. I needed quiet. Somewhere with more sky than buildings. So when I saw the listing for a 48-acre ranch just outside of town, complete with a spring-fed lake, rocky ridges, and a barn that needed fixing, I drove there the same day. Didn't even wait for a second showing. I bought it at full, asking from the daughter of the previous owner, Mr. Cole. What I didn't know, and what nobody bothered to tell me, was that for years, that lake, the one on my deed, on my land, feeding my grass and home, it had been used like a public pool by the folks in the nearby Lake Hill Estates subdivision. They treated it like their own secret resort. They'd built a floating dock without permits or ownership on the east bank, which, funny enough, was technically my side of the waterline. There was no formal agreement, just some verbal understanding with old Mr. Cole. But Mr. Cole was gone now, and I wasn't Mr. Cole. Still, I didn't come in swinging. 3 days after moving in, I did something few ranchers in boots would do. I baked cookies. Yeah, oatmeal raisin. Don't laugh. I figured, if they'd been using the lake for a while, the least I could do was introduce myself, maybe work out a schedule or some kind of arrangement. That's when I walked into the HOA office and met her. Margaret Pierce, HOA president, sharp bob haircut, pearls like she was hosting the Oscars. Wore a name badge like it was a sheriff's star. She didn't shake my hand. She didn't even look at the cookies. "I hope you're planning to maintain the shoreline," she said. "I'll do my best," I answered. "It's a ranch lake. I might use it for fishing. Maybe teach some kids from down the road how to cast." "Fishing?" she repeated, horrified. "There's no fishing allowed on HOA property." I blinked. "Ma'am, it's not HOA property. It's my ranch. The lake's on my deed." Her smile froze. Well, she sniffed. We'll see about that. I should have walked out then. But I didn't. The next morning, my private property sign vanished. 3 days later, a group of teenagers jumped off my dock and ran when I told them to leave. A week after that, a man with a clipboard knocked, claiming to have a permit to trim one of my willow trees issued by the HOA. That's when I mailed a letter, printed copies of my deed, marked the surveyor's lines in yellow highlighter. No response. Then came the barbecue, lawn chairs, loud music, beer coolers floating in the water, on my lakefront, on my property. No permission. That was my breaking point. But things were just getting started. Saturday morning. Blue sky, bird song, the smell of hickory smoke wafting across the water. At first, I thought maybe a family was having a little picnic. Happens. But as I walked down the ridge path, something felt bigger. When I reached the lakefront, I froze. There were over 24 people camped out on the shoreline. Folding chairs, coolers, kids screaming. Someone blasting country music from a Bluetooth speaker. Someone had dragged a full floating grill onto the dock, my dock, and no one looked remotely apologetic. I stood there, dumbfounded, in work jeans and a flannel, holding a bag of chicken feed for the hens. I cleared my throat. Hey folks, just want to remind you this is private property. The lake's on my ranch, and... That's when she showed up. Margaret. In full pearls and white capris like it was Easter brunch. Rick, she said, smiling like a cat, so glad you could join us. You're ruining a decade-old tradition. I bought this land fair and square, I replied, trying to stay calm. This is my lake, and nobody asked if they could use it. You don't understand, she said, her tone dropping. This lake has always belonged to the community. Just because you have a deed doesn't mean you get to hoard nature. Hoard nature. I took a slow breath. Ma'am, I'm not trying to be mean, but I can't be liable if someone gets hurt out here. You didn't even tell me this was happening. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped closer. You think you can just show up with your boots and your dog and change everything? This neighborhood has rules, Rick. Respect matters here. Respect? I didn't say anything else. Just turned, walked away, heart pounding, trying not to let the heat in my face boil over. The next morning, I found it. My boathouse. Vandalized. The lock busted. Fishing poles snapped in half. My late brother's old tackle box, the one with his initials carved in, smashed open like roadkill, and spray painted across the boathouse wall in angry red letters. HOA property. I filed a police report. No witnesses. No security cameras. Nothing they could do. So I bought cameras. Installed them on the trees, the corners of the boathouse, the dock poles, quietly. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, I took my first real boat ride. Just me, Tex, and a thermos of black coffee. The sun was rising. The mist on the lake was soft and silver. It was supposed to be peaceful, but she showed up within minutes. Margaret, phone in hand, face red, filming. This is your final warning, she yelled, and then she dialed the cops. That moment, that call, it was the most expensive mistake she ever made. The thing is, she thought she won. Margaret stood there on the rocky bank, phone pressed to her ear, narrating like she was on the evening news. He's trespassing again, she said, loud enough for the camera to pick up. We've warned him. This man is dangerous and refuses to leave HOA property. I was 50 yards out in the middle of the lake, floating gently. The only dangerous thing I held was a fishing rod. Tex let out a low growl from the bow. He could sense the energy. 5 minutes later, the police cruiser rolled up again. Same officer as before. Rhodes. Middle-aged, decent guy. Looked like he'd rather be mowing his lawn than mediating lake drama. He parked crooked on the gravel road, stepped out with a sigh, and walked toward the bank. Margaret ran to meet him. There he is, out there using our lake again. Rhodes looked at me, then at her, then back at the lake. You got proof this is your lake? He asked her. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She hesitated. Well, it's part of the community, obviously. We've used it for years. But do you own it? I don't have the documents on me, but the HOA has always... She trailed off. The officer looked at me and gestured. "Sir, could you come ashore again?" I nodded, calm, composed. Rowed back in. Stepping off the dock, I pulled a folded envelope from my coat pocket and handed it over. Inside, the deed, the official survey map, county seal and all. Rhodes took a long look. Then he looked back at Margaret. "You should probably take this up with a lawyer," he said. "I don't see any criminal activity here." Margaret fumed. "You're going to regret this." She hissed at me, loud enough for Tex to bare his teeth. I didn't say a word. Didn't gloat. I just pulled out my phone and made a call. "Greg? Yeah. Remember that Marina Margaret's HOA uses for their events? Find out who owns it. And if they're selling, I want it." What she didn't know was that the HOA didn't own the marina. They leased it from a tired old management company that was fed up with dealing with their endless rules and late payments. Greg called back 2 hours later. "They've been trying to sell for months. Want me to put in an offer?" "Cash," I said. "Today." By sundown, it was mine. The entire marina. Their dock. Their parking lot. Their 4th of July stage. Their summer concert pavilion. All mine. And I didn't tell a soul. I just waited. Until the next morning. That's when Margaret came back, with a crowbar. She stormed toward my boathouse like a woman possessed. Didn't knock, didn't scream, didn't film. She went straight to the door and pried it open like a burglar. And Tex was inside. I dropped everything. Fishing rod, coffee, phone, and I ran. "Tex!" I shouted, boots slamming the dock planks like thunder. The old boathouse door creaked under pressure as Margaret jammed the crowbar into the frame, yanking like she was trying to break into a safe. Tex's bark pierced the air sharp, panicked, not his usual playful yip. My stomach dropped. "Get away from there!" I roared, feet pounding faster. But she didn't stop. Crack! The doorframe splintered. She shoved the door open with her shoulder and stepped inside, crowbar still raised. I was seconds behind her. "Tex!" The dog bolted from the dark, ears flat, tail between his legs, and leapt into my arms just as I crossed the threshold. I looked up. Margaret stood inside my boathouse, breathing like a racehorse, hair wild, crowbar still clenched in both hands. Not the pearl-wearing HOA pageant queen I met with cookies. This was someone unhinged. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, cradling Tex as he whimpered. She spun around, eyes blazing. "This is our boathouse," she snapped. "You can't block access to Lake Hill amenities." I blinked. I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or call 911. "There are security cameras in here, Margaret. You just broke into my property. You think you can buy a lake and bully us all out?" she hissed. "We've had this for generations." I stood my ground, voice steady. "You're trespassing. You vandalized my dock. You just broke into my boathouse. And you scared my dog." I paused. "I should call the cops." She didn't flinch. "You should," she smirked, eyes gleaming. "Let's see who they care about more. Some cranky rancher with a fishing pole, or an HOA with legal representation." That was the moment. The line was crossed. She wasn't bluffing. She didn't care about peace, or neighbors, or tradition. She cared about power, control. I didn't argue, didn't shout back. I turned, locked Tex safely in the house, and drove straight into town. Not to the police, to the county records office, where Greg handed me a manila folder thicker than a steak menu. "Here you go," he said. "All signed and sealed, Rick. The marina and 40 yards of shoreline in every direction. That includes the boat ramp, the gravel road, the picnic area, even the BBQ pit." I exhaled slowly. "What about their 4th of July party?" I asked. Greg chuckled. "They're going to need your permission for that now." I didn't say a word, didn't brag, didn't post on Facebook. I just drove home, called a crew, and installed a brand new metal gate across the marina entrance. Added 2 private security signs. Painted the dock bright red. "Private property. No trespassing." Letters 3 feet tall. It took less than 2 hours. By the time I poured myself a glass of lemonade and sat on the porch, the first HOA board member showed up. Carl, the treasurer. Then Sandy, the secretary. Then Margaret, pacing like a lion behind the gate. She rattled the bars and screamed, "You can't do this." I sipped my lemonade. "I already did." She pointed at me, shaking with rage. "You're going to regret this, Rick Dawson." I stood up slowly, walked to the edge of my porch and said, "No, Margaret, you are." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew people like Margaret. When power slips from their hands, they don't retreat. They get desperate. And desperate people break things. So I made the first move. The next morning, a cease and desist letter landed on every Lake Hill HOA board member's doorstep, sent through my lawyer, neatly written, professionally brutal. Inside, documentation of every property violation, security footage timestamps, a breakdown of legal ownership, and a warning: further trespassing would lead to legal action. I even included a high-res screenshot of Margaret breaking into my boathouse. She was mid-crowbar swing, face twisted in rage. I had every right to press charges, but I didn't. Not yet. Why? Because I had something better, a plan. I was done playing defense. It was time for them to feel the rules they loved so much when they weren't in control. A week later, the Lake Hill HOA sent out their monthly newsletter. Cheery as ever. Join us for our annual lakefront BBQ. This Saturday, same time, same place. Same place, huh? That place was now behind my locked gate, the one with private property painted in bold red letters. So I waited. _Saturday came. They came early. Families in polos and cargo shorts, fold-out chairs, coolers on wheels, kids running ahead with squirt guns. And then, they hit the gate. Standing tall in front of it was Daniel, the private security guard I hired. Big guy, former sheriff's deputy, southern polite, but built like a fridge. "Afternoon, folks," he said calmly. "This is now private property. You'll need written permission to enter." The crowd stalled. Confused murmurs. Then Margaret appeared, her hair curled tighter than usual. Sunglasses too large for her face. She walked straight up to Daniel like he was a parking ticket. "You're blocking an HOA-sanctioned event," she hissed. "You can't do that." Daniel didn't flinch. "I'm acting under direct orders from the legal property owner." Margaret turned toward the crowd and shouted, "This is illegal. This man stole our lake." That was my cue. From across the water, I sat in my boat, Tex beside me, floating peacefully. But this time, I had something new. I clicked the remote. My voice rang out over the water, clean, clear, and amplified. "Good afternoon, Lake Hill. This marina is now under new ownership. Please refer to county records for confirmation. Any questions can be directed to your HOA board, or better yet, your lawyer." Silence, then murmurs, then gasps. A little girl asked, "Mommy, what's happening?" Her mom didn't answer. One family packed up, then another. Some stood frozen, some angry, some ashamed. Margaret stood there, fists clenched, trembling with rage. That night, my inbox lit up. Messages from residents. "I'm so sorry. She never told us the lake was private. We thought you were the problem. Turns out she just didn't want to lose control. My kids loved that lake. I hope we can talk." I didn't respond. Not yet. Because Margaret wasn't finished, and I knew it. At 2:43 a.m., 2 nights later, my camera caught her. Headlamp on. Hoodie up, dragging 2 trash bags behind her Lexus SUV. Inside, rotting fish. She dumped them across my front lawn, then jammed a metal stake into the grass. Attached to it was a red sign that read, "HOA Strong. We're not backing down." Tex barked from inside the house. But I didn't chase her, because I already had what I needed. High-definition video. Full face. Clear plate. Margaret Pierce. Caught in the act. Smelling like a swamp. Morning light spilled across my porch as I stood barefoot, staring at the crime scene. Dead fish, dozens of them, dumped across my front lawn like some unholy seafood sacrifice. The stench hit me like a truck. Tex whined beside me, nose twitching, tail low. On the door of my boathouse, a note stapled with gardening shears. Written in Sharpie, barely legible. "This ain't over, ranch boy. I didn't feel anger. Not this time. I felt clarity. Because now, I had her. I called Officer Rhodes. Same one who'd come for the trespassing call. Same one who saw the Marina deal go down from the sidelines. He sat at my kitchen table, a mug of bitter coffee in hand, watching the footage from my laptop. Margaret, dragging trash bags, looking straight into the camera, twice. "You sure you want to press charges?" he asked, rubbing his temple. I stared at the paused frame, her face frozen in righteous fury. "Not yet," I said. "I want to give her one last chance." Publicly. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. "You're planning something." I nodded. By Thursday, 127 printed flyers were in circulation. Bright yellow paper, bold black text. Lakefront Town Meeting. This Saturday at 3 p.m. Come hear the truth about Lake Hill. Hosted by ranch owner Rick Dawson. Free BBQ, open mic, HOA board. Welcome to attend. I didn't post it online, didn't mention the fish, didn't even respond to the apology emails piling into my inbox. This wasn't about revenge. It was about witnesses. I paid a local teenager to distribute the flyers' mailbox slips, taped to porch rails, wedged between screen doors. Every resident in Lake Hill got one. Margaret did too. Saturday, 2:45 p.m. My shoreline looked like a summer festival. Picnic blankets, fold-out tables, paper plates stacked, kids running through the grass, biting into hot dogs. Neighbors mingling, curious, hesitant, guarded. But they came. At exactly 3 p.m., I stepped onto the makeshift stage, a stack of hay bales beside the dock. Wearing jeans, boots, and a microphone headset I borrowed from the church. "Thank y'all for coming," I began, voice steady. "My name's Rick Dawson. I own this land, and I'd like to tell you the story no one else has." Whispers rippled through the crowd. "I moved here for peace. I didn't expect to be dragged into a war over a lake. But I've got the documents to prove this water, this dock, this marina you've all enjoyed is legally part of my ranch." Gasps. I held up laminated pages, the deed, the survey map, the county seal. I passed them into the crowd. A man near the front raised his hand. "Wait, the HOA doesn't own the lake?" I shook my head. "No, sir." And I tried to be neighborly. I brought cookies, introduced myself. But someone, I paused, decided I was the enemy. Then I played the footage. Margaret screaming on the shoreline, calling the cops, the vandalism, and finally, the fish dump. The screen showed her clear as daylight, dragging the bags, planting the sign, driving off like she just won something. Silence. Then, "Margaret," a woman whispered. She was sitting at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, frozen. "You told us he forged documents," someone else shouted. "You said the marina was ours." Margaret stood up, voice trembling. "He faked that footage. It's all fake." I stepped down from the stage. "Calm. The original files have already been submitted to law enforcement." Her face fell. Her lip quivered. She turned and pushed through the crowd, storming off without another word. No one followed her. Not one person. The next morning, a note was taped to my gate. "Rick, I'm sorry I let this get out of hand. I just didn't want to lose what little power I had left. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope this ends here. Margaret." And for a moment, I considered letting it go. But then I remembered. The vandalism. The fear in Tex's eyes. My brother's broken tackle box. The fish. She didn't stop because she learned a lesson. She stopped because she got caught. So I made one more call. To my lawyer. Greg, my real estate broker, and my lawyer, Cole Hendricks, sat across from me at the kitchen table. Tex lay curled beneath my feet, tail still twitching when someone mentioned Margaret. "I want to file a formal complaint," I said. Cole didn't even blink. "For what exactly?" I slid a folder across the table. "Harassment, vandalism, trespassing, fraud. And one more thing, attempted community theft." Greg raised an eyebrow. "You're not just filing a complaint, Rick. You're going to war." I nodded. No more letters, no more warnings. It's time to pull the rug out from under the whole HOA. 2 days later, we submitted the paperwork. A restraining order request against Margaret Pierce, a formal civil suit against the Lake Hill Estates HOA for misuse of funds and fraudulently claiming property rights, a petition to dissolve the HOA's legal authority over any lake-related matters. The cherry on top? HOA, an appendix full of witness emails, neighbors admitting they'd been misled, manipulated, and in some cases, forced to vote under false pretenses. Then came the leak. An anonymous email landed in my inbox. No name, no greeting, just a subject line. She's not finished. Inside was a single PDF attachment. Lake Hill Estates redevelopment proposal. Internal draft. I opened it. Page 2. A satellite image of my ranch. The lake outlined in blue, my land highlighted in red. And around it? Over 200 future homes. A floating restaurant. A community center. A multi-slip marina. And in the margins, a line that made my blood run cold. Negotiation with current ranch owner pending legal leverage. So, that was the plan. This wasn't just about HOA power. Margaret was trying to sell me. Behind closed doors, she had been working with developers, trying to strong-arm me into surrendering my lake so she could hand it over and cash out. She called the cops, filed complaints, broke into my better property not because she wanted the lake back for the community. She wanted it for a deal, for money. I forwarded the email to Greg. He called me 5 minutes later. Everland Property Development, he said. They've been sniffing around Winslow for months. You're on their target list, Rick. How do we stop it? I asked. He sighed. You don't just stop Everland, you expose them. _ So that's what I did. I called for another gathering. No flyers this time, just word of mouth. The neighbors spread it themselves after the last town meeting. I'd earned their trust. That Saturday I stood by the lake again, holding a copy of the redevelopment proposal high above my head. This is what they're planning, I said. They want to bulldoze your piece, double your HOA fees, and surround this lake with condos and cocktail bars. Gasps, yells, then pure silence. I held up a business card I found dropped near my Marina gate. Robert V. King, Regional Director, Everland Property Development Group. Margaret was seen parked beside this man 2 nights ago. They're already in talks. Your neighborhood isn't just being lied to, it's being sold out from under you. Then I passed the mic to the mayor of Winslow Bend, who had come that day after hearing about the town drama. She read the final lines of the proposal out loud. All lake access to be absorbed into Everland Holdings post-HOA acquisition. Murmurs turned into shouts. You said this was about tradition, Margaret. You told us he was lying. Margaret wasn't there. But someone else was. Carl Masters, the HOA's treasurer, bald, always quiet, always lurking. And 2 days later, the dock caught fire. _ At 6:15 a.m., Tex barked so loud I nearly fell out of bed. Smoke, thick, dark, curling up over the lake like a monster's hand. I ran out barefoot, still in pajama pants, and watched as flames tore through the wooden dock. The red paint blistered, the security signs melted. The floating barrels popped like fireworks. I tried to use my extinguisher. It wasn't enough. The fire crew said it was arson, no lightning, no electrical fault, just gasoline and intent. That evening, Rhodes showed up again. We pulled a partial fingerprint off a piece of melted glass, he said. You got security footage? Not on that side of the dock, but I had cameras along the Western Trail. I checked the footage that night. 3:12 a.m., a hooded figure walking fast, red gas can in hand, a flash of glasses, a glint of light. Carl, gotcha. I paused the footage. Carl, clear as day. That slight stoop in his shoulders, the weird way he walked like his sweater vest was always too tight. And then, the moment he turned, just enough for the light to hit his glasses, boom, the HOA treasurer, caught red-handed, walking down my trail with a red gas can and zero hesitation. I copied the footage onto a USB stick, made 2 backups, one for the police, one for me. Then I sat back in my chair, Tex curled beside me, and smiled for the first time in days. Because now I had more than broken signs or rotting fish. I had criminal arson. _ The next day, I didn't just email the cops. I called every Lake Hill resident who'd reached out to me after the BBQ. I invited them to a private showing. No flyers, no microphones, no food trucks. Just one projector screen. And the truth. _lakefront. Mid-afternoon. The ash still fresh. Over 50 neighbors showed up, standing near the scorched remains of the dock. Burned timber, warped bolts, melted plastic signs twisted like ribbons. Some brought lawn chairs. Some came with arms crossed. But they came. "Thank you for being here," I began, standing by the charred wood. "You've seen what they've done to me. You've heard what they said about me. Now let me show you who they really are." I hit play. The video began. Carl, 3:12 a.m. red gas can. Hoodie up, walking like he owned the place. Gasps, hands flying to mouths. Then the flash of flame in the corner of the dock. And finally, the moment his glasses caught the moonlight. "Carl?" Someone whispered. Murmurs swelled. Then movement in the back of the crowd. Carl himself. He'd shown up, arms folded, pretending like he belonged there. Now he was pale, sweating. "That's not," he stammered. "That could be anyone." He faked that footage. I stepped forward, calm as ever. This footage was time-stamped and already submitted to the county sheriff's office. They confirmed the identity from the fingerprint pulled off melted glass at the scene. Gasps again. "Old Mr. Howard, the war vet with the cane, shouted from the crowd. "You could have killed someone, Carl." A woman near the front stood, shaking with rage. "My kids play here every weekend. Are you insane?" Carl's eyes darted. He turned and ran like a cartoon villain, right into the trees behind the path. Half the crowd followed, shouting. But I didn't move. I already knew what came next. By dinner time, Carl Masters had been arrested, charged with felony arson, destruction of private property, false police report. The headline hit local news like a lightning bolt. HOA treasurer caught on video setting fire to private dock. But I didn't celebrate. I sat on my porch, a glass of sweet tea in hand, Tex resting his head on my boot, and I watched the smoke drift over the lake. There was silence, but not peace. Because Margaret hadn't been seen in days. But rumor had it she was planning something bigger. And I found out exactly what that was the next morning. Taped to my Marina gate was a legal document. Stamped. Signed. A letter from the Lake Hill Estates HOA and their new city attorney. They were filing to claim my lake through a twisted clause called eminent domain. They were trying to steal my land legally. And this time, they weren't just playing dirty. They were playing with fire. I held the envelope in my hand for a full minute before opening it. Thick, official stock, the kind of paper meant to intimidate. The heading across the top read, "Petition for community use and reacquisition of shared environmental assets under emergency HOA domain clause." It sounded like legal poetry. But underneath the fluff, the meaning was clear. They were trying to take my lake. I skimmed through 5 pages of legal jargon, zoning codes, and twisted logic. They claimed the lake had been used commonly by the Lake Hill Estates community for over 20 years, that it had functionally become a public amenity, that I was denying residents access to historic recreational space, that the HOA had a bulletin right to petition, eminent domain through a special environmental clause. I nearly choked on my coffee. Eminent domain. That's federal language. That's something governments use to build highways, not something an HOA can pull out like a trump card. And yet, they'd filed it, through a city attorney who must have owed someone a favor. The last page listed my lake as a shared environmental feature. They even claimed I was neglecting its upkeep after they dumped dead fish and Carl set my dock on fire. Tex whined beside me. I looked out over the lake. The water was still, calm, innocent, but my blood wasn't. I called Greg. "Tell me you've seen this." "I've seen it," he replied. "And it's nonsense, dangerous nonsense." Can they really do this? Not legally. But if they convince the zoning board to open a review, then yes, the city could get involved. You could be dragged into hearings for months. I clenched my jaw. "Okay," I said. "It's time I take the gloves off." 3 days later, I filed a counter lawsuit, not just for trespassing, not just for vandalism, but for fraud. We compiled everything. The fake permits, the video footage, the leaked redevelopment plan, the emails from neighbors confirming manipulation by the HOA, and a formal motion to dissolve Lake Hill Estates, HOA's authority over any property or land they didn't own. My lawyer, Cole, looked at me across the table. "You sure about this? This is scorched earth." I nodded. "I'm not backing down." Then the media caught wind. It started small, local newspapers and AM radio, but by the following week, it had blown up. Headlines everywhere: rancher fights HOA, attempt to seize private lake, lakefront war, HOA, accused of fraud, arson, and secret developer deals, retired engineer battles, HOA, over property rights, and he's winning. Even state news picked it up. A clean-cut photo of me in my denim jacket, standing by the burned dock, Tex at my side. They called it the Lake War. That week, a local reporter knocked on my gate. "Can I get a statement, Mr. Dawson?" I nodded. "It's my lake," I said. "I bought it legally. I have the deed. They never did. They just wanted control. Now they've lost it and they're throwing tantrums." He printed it word for word. It went viral. And suddenly, I was getting emails from people all over the country. "My HOA took my garden. I wish I'd fought back like you. You're doing this for all of us who've been bullied by HOA boards. Keep going. We're behind you." 2 weeks later, the city council held an emergency hearing. The Lake Hill HOA came in force. Suits, clipboards, their shiny new attorney, even a printed banner with their logo. And Margaret? Front and center, dressed like she was auditioning for a reality television show. Confident. Cold. Coiled. I came in with Greg, Cole, and one slim manila folder. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium and said, "This lake was purchased for $890,000 with a clean title. There are no liens, no HOA easements. The previous owner allowed shared access voluntarily. That ended when I bought it. Since then, I've endured harassment, vandalism, and criminal acts now under police investigation." Then I set a copy of the security footage on the council desk. Cole added, "The HOA has no legal standing. They attempted to seize private land under false pretense. And their redevelopment proposal leaked by a former board member shows intent to defraud this city and its residents." Silence. Then Councilman Reeves leaned forward. "Miss Pierce," he said, "do you have any document showing legal ownership of the lake or marina?" Margaret blinked. "I know. But our community has always. Do you have any contract showing HOA rights to that land?" She looked at her lawyer, then shook her head. "No, sir." That was it. Hearing over. 3 days later, the ruling came in the mail. HOA petition denied. HOA lake access revoked. Rick Dawson recognized as sole legal owner of lake and adjacent structures. I stared at the letter. Then I walked outside and nailed it right above the marina gate. But as I stood back, Tex growling low beside me, I spotted something. At the edge of the tree line, a silver SUV. And next to it, a man in a black suit, watching me. And then he raised his phone and snapped a photo. The man didn't wave, didn't speak. He just stood there, black suit crisp despite the summer heat, phone still in his hand. Then he turned, stepped into the silver SUV Margaret's, and vanished into the woods behind Lake Hill Estates. Tex growled low, hackles raised. He never barked without a reason. I walked down to the gravel path where the man had been standing. The dust hadn't settled yet, and there, half buried in the pebbles, was a clean white card. Embossed. Expensive. Everland Property Development Group, we build tomorrow's communities. Robert V. King, Regional Director. So, it was true. Margaret had brought in corporate firepower. I called Greg immediately. "You ever heard of Everland?" I asked. There was a long pause. "Yeah. They're bad news. They buy up ranchland, pressure owners into selling, then slap up 300 houses and a yoga lawn. They've ruined 3 lake towns in Arizona this year alone. They're working with Margaret," I said. "They want this land. All of it." Another pause. Then Greg muttered, "She's trying to sell the entire neighborhood." The next morning, I got the proof. An anonymous tip hit my inbox. No name. Just one attachment. Lake Hill Estates redevelopment proposal. Internal draft. Updated. I opened the PDF and nearly dropped my coffee. Page 2. A map with my lake dead center. My ranch outlined in bold red. Around it, 240 projected homes, luxury apartments, a wellness center, and a massive expanded marina. The worst part? A line at the bottom of the map. Negotiation with current ranch owner, pending legal leverage. They never intended to coexist with me. They intended to break me. So I called a press conference. Never done one before. Never wanted to. But this was bigger than fishing rods and spray paint. This was about standing up to greed. We set up a makeshift podium at the lakefront. A few folding chairs, some hay bales, my voice. That's all I needed. Neighbors came. Reporters came. Even the town mayor showed up late with a folding stool and a Diet Coke. I stood before the crowd and held up the business card. Everlyn wants this land, this lake, this peace, and they've been working with your HOA board behind closed doors to get it. Gasps. They filed lawsuits, lied about ownership, and now they're trying to spin eminent domain to force me out. But here's the part they didn't count on me not selling. Not a square foot. Not a pebble. I passed out copies of the redevelopment map. Showed the crowd the proposal line by line. This isn't about preserving the lake, I said. It's about replacing it with piers, condos, paved walkways, and HOA dues that'll make your head spin. The mayor took the mic next. If these documents are real and we have no reason to doubt they are, there will be a full investigation into both the HOA and Everlyn, effective immediately. Cheers. Applause. A few shouts of, "Shut 'em down." But the celebration didn't last long. That night, just after midnight, a rock slammed into my front door. I leapt from bed. Tex barked like a siren. No one was outside, but on the porch, in a manila envelope, were photos. Photos of me, Tex, my ranch, my sister's cabin 2 miles away, each one labeled with a number. And on the back of the final photo, me standing at the Marina gate, was a message. "You're playing a big man's game, ranch boy. Careful what you protect. Some things break easy." I stood there, frozen. This wasn't HOA drama anymore. This was criminal intimidation. So, I did the only thing left to do. I called the feds. I reported the redevelopment proposal, the anonymous threats, the kickbacks, the zoning fraud, the government grant listed on hand, page 9 of Everlyn's own file, because if Everlyn had lied to get that grant, that was federal fraud. The agent on the other end didn't hesitate. "Mr. Dawson," she said, "we'll be in touch." But they weren't the first to act. The very next morning, Tex was gone. Leash still hanging. Bowl still full. Gate unlatched. I called for him until my voice cracked. Nothing. Then I saw another note taped to the boathouse door. "Stand down, sell, or your dog won't be the last thing to disappear." My knees gave out. I dropped to the porch and stared at the gravel path where he always waited for me. But I didn't cry. I stood up, walked inside, and called Officer Rhodes. By sunset, 3 unmarked black SUVs rolled into Winslow Bend. The Everlyn field office, 20 miles north, was raided. Computers confiscated. Phones seized. Agents stormed Margaret's house that same night. And the best part? An hour later, my phone rang. Gas station 2 towns over. Manager said, "Sir, I think we have your dog." Tex had been found tied behind a dumpster, covered in dust, hungry but alive. A 10-year-old boy had recognized him from the news coverage. Tex barked when he saw me, jumped straight into my arms. I cried. I didn't care who saw. That night, Everlyn made headlines. Land developer implicated in zoning fraud and dog-napping scandal. HOA president arrested in widening lakefront investigation. America's favorite ranch dog returns home. Yeah, they even made Tex a Twitter account. And just like that, the empire crumbled. But the final chapter was still to come. The official ruling came on a quiet Tuesday morning. It arrived in a simple envelope, no drama, but the words inside were enough to rewrite the story of Lake Hill Estates forever. To Mr. Rick Dawson, following the results of the investigation into zoning abuse, criminal trespass, HOA mismanagement, and civil fraud, the Winslow Bend Council has voted unanimously to dissolve the Lake Hill Estates HOA charter, effective immediately. Furthermore, all prior claims to shared lake access or easement are null and void. You, Rick Dawson, are recognized as sole legal owner of the lake, marina, and surrounding shorelines. I read it 3 times. Then I walked outside and nailed it to the new marina gate, right beside the old red paint that once read, "Private Property." This time, I didn't need red letters. The truth was louder. Margaret Pierce? She was arrested for fraudulent use of HOA funds, filing false claims, accepting bribes disguised as consulting fees from Everlyn, and obstruction of zoning proceedings. Turns out that $75,000 landscaping invoice she submitted was a cover. Everlyn had paid her off. She had tried to sell the soul of a community and failed. Carl. Still sitting in a holding cell awaiting trial for arson and false accusations. The rest of the HOA board scattered like pigeons. Some resigned. Some vanished. One tried to start a Facebook group called Take Back the Lake. It got 2 likes. One of them was his own wife. A month later, I got an offer from the town council. They wanted me to purchase the entire Lake Hill Marina zone outright now, devalued after the scandal, its HOA funding gone. I bought it for pennies on the dollar. Then I bulldozed every fake HOA sign from the shoreline, every no barbecues after 8 p.m., every no inflatable pool toys, every lawn must be cut to 1.5 inches. Gone. And in its place, I raised a new sign. Welcome to Winslow Lake Community Dock Open Access. Free use. No HOA. Just respect the land and each other. Opening day? Over 300 people came. Families, couples, kids and floaties. There was music, food trucks, folding chairs lined up by the water. Someone brought a cardboard cutout of Tex wearing sunglasses. Kids took selfies with him. An old man shook my hand and said, "You saved this place." A woman brought me a homemade pie. Another offered to repaint the dock for free. I smiled, but inside, I felt something else. Relief. Not just because I'd won, but because I'd earned it the right way. Now, every evening, I sit on the dock with Tex beside me. We watch the sun glide across the lake. Same lake they tried to steal. Same water they claimed to own. But it's still mine. Because I fought. Not with fists, not with lies, but with truth, with evidence. With every quiet man's greatest weapon, persistence. If someone ever tells you the HOA has more power than you, don't believe them. If someone says you can't fight back because they have lawyers, don't believe that either. Because I was just a retired guy with a dog and a deed, and in the end, that was enough. So next time someone calls the cops on you for floating a boat on your own lake, just smile and ask them, "You sure you want to play this game?" Because some of us, we know how to finish it. Thank you for watching. If you've ever had an HOA nightmare, drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. And never forget, kindness isn't weakness, and justice sometimes wears boots.